please welcome Dr. Ian Bremmer, President of the Eurasia Group, and President of the Republic of Colombia, His Excellency Iván Duque.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, Mr. President. I want to start. I mean, I know that Jennifer Lawrence tomorrow is being interviewed by Gayle King, so I wanted to start just by apologizing. This is what you're stuck with. But as someone who comes from not just an understanding of the business community, but also from the multilateral organizations, from the IDB, I wonder, you see the world today, and many of these organizations getting less support than they have historically, maybe under threat. What does that make you think as President of the Republic of Colombia today? How does it change the way you think about the world for the country you're governing?
Well, first of all, it's a pleasure to share this panel with you, Ian, and it's a pleasure for me to be here in Concordia. Maybe I would begin my answer by saying that one of the things that I remember as a good influence was a book I read from Kenichi Omai, where he said that we have to think globally and act locally. What makes a difference when you're running a country, when you're governing, is that you have to be aware that every single decision you make, doesn't matter if it's taken in a faraway municipality, has to be based on what would be the global impact. So for example, when we talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, every decision that we make in terms of health, education, nutrition in a municipality is because at the end we're working for a highest purpose, that is to achieve a goal that has been defined by many nations. I had the privilege of work at the IDB for 14 years. And I saw how multilateralism can have a sound impact on communities because we bring donors, because we have technical cooperation. So today, what we cannot let happen is that multilateralism fails. We can't allow nationalism and isolationism to become the force that destructs all the things that we have built inside the multilateral community. So as head of state, that's one purpose that I have. Build on multilateralism, common purposes and objectives that have the impact on every single community in my country.
You had a meeting with the U.S. ambassador to the UN earlier today. You're going to be seeing the President of the United States later this week. Many people say that Trump is a disruptive force on the global stage. How do you see it, and how do you approach your conversation that you're going to have with him this week?
Well, first of all, I must say that today I saw something that was positive, and is that 130 countries with the leadership of the United States signed a declaration where we have to face the impact of illegal drugs in society. So it integrates the focus on public health, on how is it that we're going to prevent, how is it that we're going to promote good habits, but at the same time, how is it that we're going to put an end to the illegal traffic of components for the production of methamphetamines or cocaine? How is it that in the production countries like Colombia, we're now not only facing the need to substitute and eradicate illegal crops and define alternative development, but how is it that we're going to stop the consumption records that we're facing?
Which the U.S. was fully a part of.
Yes. Yes. So I take that as a good initiative. And tomorrow, when I have my bilateral meeting, the U.S. and Colombia have been strategic partners. It's not only our most important trade partner, but we have been cooperating on defense, technology, agriculture, alternative development. So I want to strengthen that relationship, and that's the message that I've been getting from the U.S. administration. So I take that meeting, and I foresee that meeting with a lot of positive thoughts, and I think we're going to strengthen this relationship because it has been bipartisan for a long time. and it should be kept that way for the interest of both nations.
The President called you out personally, saying good things about what you're doing in terms of cracking down on drug trade in Colombia.
Yes, I was honored by that, but I think the reason why I felt that it was a good message is because the decisions that we're making now have global impact. If I go to a community in the Colombian Pacific to dismantle criminal organizations that are in the drug business, that local decision has a global impact. It impacts the US, it impacts Europe, it impacts Latin American countries, because there's a transnational criminal chain. So I felt that this support for the policies that we're implementing is also a support of a fight, or not a fight, of an effort that requires more countries to participate. And the effort against illegal drugs is not an effort only that has to be led by Colombia, but that involves our neighboring countries and involves the US. So I see this as an opportunity to keep on building.
Now, how have you related, at the beginning of the year, from January until I think it was July, your country had the best performing currency in the entire EM space. That of course has not been true in the last couple months. How much do you think there is a potential contagion effect from the challenges we've started to see in some of the big emerging markets, as well as some that are neighboring? What do you think is the cause?
Well, I think Colombia is today very well praised in the markets. When you compare the rest of the countries in Latin America and the uncertainty that you see in Argentina, in Venezuela, in Brazil, and nowadays for different reasons, Colombia is seen as a stable market. We have sound fiscal policies. We are a pro-business administration. We want to eliminate red tape. We want to make regulation more business friendly. So those decisions that we have put together in the last month are now having an impact on the way the markets and the investors behave. But obviously there are things that are generating cautiousness, but not in Colombia, worldwide. The impact of trade conflicts is going to hurt the emerging markets anyway. And the other thing is that the expectations that countries like the US might increase interest rates also generates the idea that some investors want to move before those races begin. So it has an impact on the currency. But I must say, the great message that we have is that in 2018, we might be very close to the inflation target that is close to 3%. Good message. The other thing is that we have now 25% of our bonds in hands of international investors. That's a signal of confidence. And the third thing is that we're regaining industrial investment and consumer confidence is growing very fast. That's because I think we have given the right signals to the markets and to the way we're going to manage the economy.
With the fiscal environment tightening in Colombia now, though, I mean, how much are you going to be able, do you believe, to follow through on, say, corporate tax reduction? Are there challenging policies in that environment?
I like that question because when we look at Colombia, the most important challenge we face in social terms is informality. And give me just 1 minute to tell you a story. Yeah. I had the visit of Pedro Sanchez, the president of Spain, and he said, Iván, how many people do you have in Colombia? And I said, something close to 50 million, the same as Spain. Then he asked me, how many people are in your working force, in your employed, quote unquote, population? I said, 22 million, almost the same as yours. And then he asked me, what's your individual income per capita? And I said, we're less than $7,000 and you're above $25,000. So then I asked him the question, how many people do you have paying income tax in Spain? And he said, 21 million. And I said, we only have less than 3 million. Then I asked him, how many people are contributing to Social Security in Spain? I said 19 million. Well, I said in Colombia it's less than 8 million. So if we want to face that reality, that is informality, because most of the people that are in the working force are not formal workers, how is it that we're going to accelerate formalization? The ones who formalize are the corporations. And the reason why they don't formalize dynamically is because they have very high levels of taxation. So we're going to lower the corporate tax, and we're going to increase taxation with the people of very high income that can pay a little bit more, so we can compensate, but we have to make that decision. We have to eliminate unnecessary expenses, and we have to identify how do we eliminate red tape and unnecessary procedures. With that, I hope that the economy will start receiving more investment and we can get a growth level above 4% next year. But it's because we have to tie the lowering of tax, the promotion of the private sector with generating formal jobs. That is the most important social policy we can undertake at this point.
That's a message that clearly is going to resonate well in this room and in a lot of places around the world. But how hard is it to deliver that at home today, especially given the surge that we know against the big business?
Well, I think there are two types of challenges. The ones that are not a challenge at all is that there are some decisions that we can take from the executive, eliminating unnecessary expenses, cutting red tape, improving regulation. But when you have to go to Congress, which is my biggest challenge right now, is that we are also changing the way politics work in Colombia. Because regularly, some of my predecessors, they have exchanged with Congress votes or appointments or contracts for the decisions they make in the legislature. But that creates corruption. So what I'm trying to say to Congress is, we have to put the policy debate at a higher level. And we have to work for the future of this country based on principles, but I'm not going to give you neither a contract nor an appointment in exchange of a vote.
So you're changing the sausage making?
Yes. And it has to be done, Ian. And it has to be done because people in Colombia don't want that to continue. And the reason why some populists can take advantage in the political spectrum is because they take that hatred and that unrest to build their access to power. So if we do things correctly, we fight corruption, we make this more transparent, I know we'll get the reforms done, and we'll at the same time do it, putting before the Colombian people that for the first time, there is a government that wants to put their relation with Congress in front of everyone so that we can eliminate that level of corruption that has derailed politics in many countries in Latin America.
And this is an important message, as you mentioned, in so many countries in Latin America. And President Macri in Argentina is trying to address it in his own way. AMLO is trying to address it in his own way.
Vizcarra in Peru is doing the same.
Of course. If Bolsonaro were to win in Brazil, we hear these conversations as well. How much do you think, I mean, not all have succeeded on this path. Do you think a country like Brazil, a country like Mexico can have success with those sorts of policies, given how entrenched those difficulties are today?
It is a big challenge, but it's the challenge people want the leaders to face. We had a public consultation in Colombia a month ago, and something close to 12 million people went to vote, and they voted against corruption, so that some policies were implemented. I supported the public consultation, and then we called for a technical table with all the political parties, and then we went to Congress and presented a set of bills that have to be approved before December. But the technical table also supported the bills that I presented on August the 8th, and they're all against corruption. So if you can get a country to unite in policies that ought to be implemented because the public opinion is saying, we want you to act. It is the time where we have to do this in Latin America. President Vizcarra, a couple of days ago, got 2 important bills approved against corruption with an overwhelming majority in Congress because there was a strong pressure from public opinion. So I believe that we have to do this because it's the right path and the right decisions that we shall make. Reforms, but with full transparency between Congress, and the executive. People don't want more corruption in that relationship.
So what I hear you saying in one word is that if you are anti-corruption in a real way, you can be pro-business, you can be pro-free trade.
Of course, and one of the things that we presented to Congress, and this is a strong message, companies that bribe public servants, neither the company, nor the owners, nor the managers will never be able to contract with the Colombian state. It's a strong message. So if you get into bribery, you know what the end of the game is going to be. I think those strong messages are necessary at times where some people in the private sector believe that they are capable of acceding to public contract by bribing servants.
Now, can you have more flexibility on migration as well if you're taking these issues on?
The issue of migration has been very controversial worldwide, but I will tell you an example in Colombia. When the Syrian crisis emerged, a country like Turkey received 1.9 million Syrians in a term of 6 years. We have received, we have received in Colombia almost 1 million in a term of 2 years. And I will never close the border because people are running from a dictatorship. It generates obviously fiscal stress and social stress, especially because we don't have the profound fiscal capacity that some countries in Europe had when they had this migration shock. But it's because it is a moral duty to serve these people that are running from dictatorship. Now, what we have to do as well is to elevate the debate. And that means that we have to ask for other countries in Latin America to adopt a temporary protection status so that they can also help us receive some of the migrants and give them job opportunities temporarily. But at the same time, multilaterally, we need to do something about the source of the problem, that is the dictatorship in Venezuela. That's why this week, with other heads of state, we will be signing a declaration to denounce against the International Criminal Court the dictatorship in Venezuela, the dictator of Venezuela, so that an investigation can be put in place.
Now,
and finally, we have to call the big powers so that there are strong sanctions against the dictatorship.
Well, that's where I was going.
Freezing assets,
yep.
Seizing assets, and making a diplomatic blockade against the regime is needed. And I hope that this UN assembly helps us put together those sanctions in place. It is a moral duty, not of Colombia, but the whole international community. This is the biggest migration crisis in Latin America's history, and one of the most profound humanitarian crises in the world.
No, and here in the United States, we pay a lot more attention when it's migration to a Western country than it is in South America, where we don't care as much, doesn't get the news. The United States is the superpower in this region. What do you want the Americans to be doing on this Venezuela issue?
First, I want, and I think we're getting there, because I see a strong commitment from the United States government to denounce the dictatorship in Venezuela, and maybe the next step that the U.S. is capable of doing it, and they have the instruments, is freezing and seizing assets, putting restrictions on some migration movements of the people that are at the head of the administration. So they have restrictions to move throughout the world. And the other thing is that we get a strong support in the denouncement we're making against the dictator before the International Criminal Court. Those are things that are necessary at this moment. And I would say we need to build with the Inter-American Development Bank a fund that can provide us resources to attend some of the social pressure that is coming out of that strong migration. President Moreno from the IDB, who's a good friend and who's a strong leader,
I used to work for him,
and he's putting together a $1 billion fund that can be used by Colombia and other countries to attend the people that are migrating and that are from low-income families, so that they gain access to health and education and other things. And the U.S. can play a strong role at the IDB and regionally to put more resources to the fund.
One big controversy recently was the question of to what extent the United States should be engaging with either opposition members directly and/or with these generals, conversations of those that were thinking about perhaps moving against the Maduro administration. What is your view on that?
There was a lot of speculation that, people sometimes speculate in the media or in op-eds about there was going to be a military action. But I think the message has been very clear. This is not a military solution. And there was a statement today by the Department of State saying that the solution is more political and diplomatic than military. And I have always said this: the dictator wants to build the military myth because that's what he needs. He needs to create a demon in order for him to remain in office. So we cannot give them that tool. What ought to be done is a strong multilateral sanction and denouncement against the dictator and the diplomatic isolation based on the humanitarian crisis he has created and based on the migration crisis that he has created. That message is more coherent than any other. And if Maduro gets investigated and trialed by the International Criminal Court and he gets sanctioned, then the whole international community will have the instruments to make him pay for the crimes he has committed. That's stronger than any other thing.
We didn't prep any of this. I just want to let you know that. Let me ask you a quick one. I can't let you go.
Yeah, tell them that you're asking questions, not me reading the answers. Okay?
Yeah, that's right. Well, funny, this is the first one I'm looking to. It's actually prepared. But I know that we have to ask you about the peace deal with the FARC. That is getting a fair amount of news in the United States, and the fact that many of these fighters are now returning to fighting. How do you address that in your administration?
First of all, when I run for the presidency, I never said that I was going to destroy the agreements. I always said that we had to make some improvements and make some corrections to the things that were not going well. What were the things that were not going well? Well, specifically, the country jumped from 15,000 hectares of coca crops to more than 200,000 in just 5 years. We've also seen people that were kingpins who have hidden weapons or hidden assets. And we have seen some former members of the organization that are dealing with narco trafficking. So when we came to office on August the 7th, I said, for the people that truly are making a transition with the armament, reinsertion, and reincorporation, we're ready to support, and we will keep the state word. We will give investments to the regions of the country that were hidden by violence. But what we are not going to accept is that there are people who are going back to criminal activities. Zero tolerance with that. So I can say we're complying with the word of the state for the people that are in reinsertion, but we're having a strong message that we're going to fight those criminals that want to continue blasting the Colombian people, and at the same time, we have to do something to put an end to the exponential growth of coca crops. So we build an integral policy where we can have interdiction, where we can have substitution, eradication, alternative development, but also promoting good habits and preventing. And we signed a decree so that we can confiscate illegal drugs in Colombian streets. All this is put together, and I think that's the best way to say we want peace, but peace can only be built if we have rule of law.
So, Mr. President, before we go, you know that here at Concordia we're particularly interested in trying to promote the provision of public goods. And a little Colombian bird told me that you might have an announcement to make on this stage. I'm hoping I could convince you to do that.
Well, thank you, Ian. And maybe it's not a bird, it's a big bird. I'm actually taking the opportunity here in Concordia to say that Colombia is going to support the action plan that has been launched by the Secretary General of the UN that is called WASH, to promote water, sanitation, and hygiene in different countries. And for us, it is the right tool and the right mechanism so that we can get to low-income communities, provide them water, storage, sanitation, and with that have a positive impact on health so that we can reduce the diseases that are transmittable and at the same time have an impact on things that are very hurting, like children dying in the first 1,000 days of life. So supporting WASH as a global initiative and applying it in Colombia goes back when I told you that we have to think globally and act locally with this program of water and sanitation.
Well, Mr. President, first, I really applaud both that announcement as well as any president that's willing to throw away your talking points the way you have in front of this audience today. I know we all wish you a great visit and successful trip here for the UNGA and with President Trump on Wednesday. Will you please all join me in giving him a very warm appreciation?
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.